Alright, let's get this over with. Hello everybody, my name is Kevin and welcome back to another album review. And today, it's a really big one. I'm talking about the 8th album from Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon. Well, here we are. We've made it to the classic Floyd period. This album, with its iconic cover, is one of the 10 best-selling albums of all time. It transcended the band and rock music itself into higher levels. It has constantly been called one of the greatest things mankind has ever created, and as a result of that, some people, including critics, have started saying that this album is actually really overrated and that people should stop hyping it up so much.
It's not even their best and most ambitious concept album.
Needless to say, nowadays the overall response from people on this album is pretty mixed. But as for my opinion, look, call me insanely basic, but I love this album to death. This album just aligns everything absolutely perfectly. There's not a single negative thing that I can say about this album, seriously. And yes, the reason I'm saying this is that I have decided that The Dark Side of the Moon is in fact a 10 out of 10 for me. Call me basic, but I don't care. There are a few very important things about this record though. First of all, it's a concept album, and it's basically a concept of, life in general. It has themes of death, time, greed, conflict, and a lot of other topics, like really, even mental instability and everything. And it would be impossible to take any track from this album out of context, except for maybe Money. And also, both sides are basically mixed into a continuous mix. Now, I love continuous mixes, but whenever I listen to an album where pauses interrupt the mix, it honestly doesn't really bother me all that much. Maybe I've gotten used to it. And looking into the lyrics of the album, I was thinking, holy crap, this is all so insanely complicated, but that is probably something that is really important. If you want to say something genius about something, you could do it really shortly, but most of the time you have to go into insanely complicated details, and that's what Pink Floyd did on this album. And wow, it requires a lot of thinking, and yet somehow it also doesn't. Oh my god, the lyrical content on this album is amazing as well. So, let's get into the track list. We open with Speak to Me, which is basically an overture for the album. It starts with a kick drum that resembles a heartbeat, and then it gets louder and louder, and then you hear other voices and sound effects and everything, and it all just kind of comes together. It culminates, and then you hear a sample of Claire Torres singing, which appears later in the album, and as I said, all of that culminates, and that transitions into Breathe in the Air. Like, opening with something like that is so simple and yet absolutely insane. Meanwhile, Breathe in the Air is basically just a simple little piece. The instrumentation on this song is absolutely amazing, and it talks about the things that you will do in life, and those themes in particular are later on, explored on the album. And yeah, this is a really, really good track, and pretty underrated, actually. I mean, it starts everything out, but it's still, amazing. I really do love it. And then we get into On the Run, a fast-paced, synthesizer-based track, with also some really fast cymbal playing all throughout the track. And I guess it's about the fear of traveling, more specifically, being in a rush and being out of control while you travel. And yeah, it's pretty chaotic, it's all over the place, there's footsteps all around, and then it all culminates with a crash, and basically that crash alone describes the fear of traveling. And then that transitions into the clocks that start out the track Time. So Time is the first track on here, which is really complicated to talk about. It starts out with, all of the clock noises, and then it goes into this 2-minute passage where Nick Mason plays a drum solo, and there's also some really creepy guitars and, organs, and yeah. They're just wasting time with this, aren't they? So yes, the song Time is about time itself, And as I said, those first 2 minutes are basically like the band kind of just wasting time, you know. And then the song itself starts really quickly, and then Gilmour just belts out a verse where he's talking about, you know, kind of just wasting hours on things that, you know, you like doing, but they're not really all that special. And, you know, time just passes while you do these things. It's actually really, really relatable. Like, a lot of the time when I'm bored, I'm just doing random things to pass the time. Sometimes just tell stories to myself or just talk to myself. You know, I'm that kind of person who talks to themselves. And then, you know, the fact that they wasted time on the first 2 minutes is also capitalized by the guitar solo, which appears after the first verse. So yeah, wasting time is basically the prime topic of this track. And on that note, the guitar solo is absolutely insane. Like, this whole song sounds like they performed it at an open air stage in the night, and everything sounds like it's, you know, on Earth, and you can only hear it in that specific place. But the guitar solo on this track sounds like the sounds are getting shot out into outer space. Like, this guitar solo is seriously from like another world. Gilmour did an absolutely fantastic job on this solo, and most people agree with me. It's apparently one of the best solos they've ever made, or written, sorry. And then there's another verse about, you know, how, you know, you've wasted all these years, and then, you know, all this time has gone by, and now you're trying to catch up with all the time, but, you know, you're not actually gonna do that much. And then, you know, the song ends, but then they want to say something else, and then that transitions into a reprisal of Breathe, where, you know, there was the fear of traveling, and also, you know, wasting all the time. And now, after all of that, you know, it's just nice to be home again and be at the fire. You know, just warming yourself. And yeah, this reprisal of Breathe is absolutely genius. And then, you know, the reprisal itself also leads into the next track where they talk about a funeral, which is like on the other side of town or something. And that funeral is the Great Gig in the Sky, which, oh my god, this song is like, wow, this song is an absolutely emotional masterpiece. It's probably my favorite song on the album. Richard Wright wrote this one, and, you know, it's about, you know, the possibility of death. Like, the Great Gig in the Sky itself is like a reference to heaven, and the piano playing is absolutely beautiful, with some other voices throughout the first minute. And then the drums come in, and Claire Torrey starts singing, and holy Christ, her voice, even though there's no actual lyrics, there's just wordless vocals by her, but her voice is absolutely insane, and it really feels like you're going up into the sky. You're going into heaven, and yeah, her voice is amazing. The instrumentation on this is absolutely amazing, and then after another minute of all that insanity, we once again quiet down, and her voice just continues on, and the pianos continue on as well without any drums, and wow, what a way to end side one on the album. And yeah, this is just absolutely wonderful track. I absolutely love this one. There's really no words for it. And then we open side 2 with Money, which starts with all these, you know, noises like related to money, and those noises then form a 7/4 beat, which is then played on the drums, and that beat is really nice. And there's also some pretty good guitar and bass work on this track, as well as the organs. Lyrically, it's about, you know, money being the problem of everything. Also, the lyrics are really blunt on this track. And there's also a pretty nice sax solo there in the middle of the track, and then it all speeds up for the guitar solo. And then after the guitar solo, it once again slows down and starts talking about, you know, money again. And yeah, it is kind of true that money is basically the biggest problem in the world nowadays. And at the end of the song, there's even more voices, you know, talking over the instrumental, and then all of this transitions into the next song, Us and Them, another big emotional masterpiece, which is about the pointlessness of war, continuing the one topic that Waters is the most notorious of writing about. And yeah, the pointlessness of war is definitely exposed in this track. I mean, it's about binaries, the sax solos are pretty beautiful on this one. There's a lot of quiet build-ups, and then really dramatic and loud payoffs that are just absolutely wonderful. It's also the longest track on here, and it definitely deserves to be the longest one. It's also really beautiful. And then that transitions into Any Color You Like, which is a nice little instrumental where it has, a bunch of, synth and organ solos, and also guitar solos. And it's all really, really nice, also pretty underrated. It's no surprise that when played live, the band would usually, turn this song into more of a live jam. And yeah, this is also the one track. If I would pick one song, if I could pick one song from this album on which I could say Dire Straits was definitely influenced by this, it would definitely be Any Color You Like. Like seriously, the guitar tones on this track really do sound like they're coming from Mark Knopfler from the future. I really don't know if they were influenced by this or anything, but it really does sound like it. It's also a really, really nice track, and as I said, pretty underrated. And then that transitions into Brain Damage, which is actually about mental instability and is mostly inspired by, once again, their former frontman Syd Barrett. Roger Waters on this track is talking about how people want to change him, and then, he's sad once they've changed him, which is also pretty relatable for me. I mean, I might also be a lunatic and maybe a crazy person, at least that's what some people think, but, maybe there are lunatics who are actually smarter than most of society, and people just want to think of them as lunatics and not actual smart people. It's also a really relatable track, and I really, really like it. And finally, the album ends with Eclipse, which is basically a summary of everything that you are, you yourself, and that all of these things are, your own, and it's really hard to work for these things and make them perfect, but in the end, none of it matters. In the last couple of weeks, I've started to think, is there actually any meaning to life? And I don't think there actually is. It's really hard to talk about. If there is a meaning of life, then I have no idea what it is, because everything you do is just one little thing, and all these little things don't culminate into 100% of what you do in life. And that's how the song ends, It summarizes everything that you are, but all of that won't matter in the end. And then the song ends with that kick drum again that symbolizes a heartbeat, and that symbolizes the entire circle of life. It perfectly bookends the album as well. So yeah, really nice ending to the record. And also, many people might be wondering, but what are all these voices in the background of many of the songs? Well, Pink Floyd decided they wanted to interview people that they knew, but instead of actually talking with them, they wrote questions on little cards. And then where those people stood or sat, there would be a little microphone, and then they recorded their responses to those questions with that microphone. Even Paul and Linda McCartney were interviewed, but their voices are not in this album because the band felt that they were trying too hard to be funny. And instead we have a bunch of recordings from their roadies and other friends of theirs who worked at Abbey Road Studios and all that. And these voices appear on almost every single track, aside from Breathe in the Air, Time, and Any Color You Like. So, that's everything on The Dark Side of the Moon. I really don't have any issues with it. I could probably do a full in-depth analysis of this album someday, and yeah, that could probably happen someday, but for now, I'll just, summarize my thoughts in this video. The production and instrumentation is excellent across the board, the singing is really good, the lyrics, while they might seem simplistic at first, but they are also really genius. The way all these songs build and progress keeps your interest throughout the entire running time. Just every element of this album, big or small, is executed wonderfully. But I also understand the people who criticize it. No one wants to hear the opinion this is objectively the greatest album ever made on an album that they either don't like or even when they haven't heard it yet. In my opinion, though, every piece of acclaim that this album has gotten over the past 5 decades is absolutely well deserved. As I said, everything is absolutely fantastic on this album. I would give it my highest recommendations. It's the Dark Side of the Moon. You can't go wrong with it. And that's pretty much it. I don't have much else to say. The Dark Side of the Moon is a 10 out of 10. And you already knew that. But of course, this is all just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, and if you have any opinions on this album, you can leave them in the comments below. Regularly scheduled Pink Floyd reviews coming soon, and that's it. I'm Kev from Pest, and you've just learned a bit more about music today.